Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. I'm Cynthia Chaplin, and this is Voices. Every Wednesday, I will be sharing conversations with international wine industry professionals, discussing issues in diversity, equity, and inclusion through their personal experiences working in the field of wine. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe and rate our show wherever you get your pods. Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening. This evening, I've got Rob Miller with me, coming from Canada to talk to us. Rob is an Italian wine ambassador, as well as someone who's been in the wine industry for quite a while in Canada and has recently started a new importing company called The Road Wine, which is his pandemic baby, and doing some very interesting things with the portfolio that he is curating. So, Rob, thanks for joining us tonight. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to chat with you.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure. So I know that your background is Canada, total Canada. I know you've grown up in Ontario and you have chosen to remain there. So let's hear a little bit, please, about what you're doing in terms of importing wine and how you actually got into the wine business. I'm curious.
So I've worked in and around restaurants most of my life, dating back. In fact, my first restaurant job as a bus person back in the late 80s in a bar. Spent a lot of time in the 90s while I was in school and then out of school, working in restaurants, but not at not any that had a great wine program. I had a number of friends that worked in fine dining or finer dining, anyways. And when we would meet, after work to have some drinks, they'd bring these great wines, and I'd have my Smirnoff Ice. And it just I figured, if I'm going to stay in this industry, if this is something I'm actually serious about, I'm going to have to take a wine course and maybe learn a little bit more, or even just to hang out with my friends. Still, I was going to have to learn a little bit more. So, I took a class at a local college in Toronto. That was back in 1999, and as they say, the rest is history. I was lucky. I worked with the LCBO, the product consultant. LCBO is the monopoly, the retail monopoly arm of the Ontario government, which handles importing all beverage alcohol here into Ontario. So it was a great role. I was on a number of tasting panels, was able, on an average month, I would taste between 300 and 500 wines. So it was very instrumental in a very young part of my career in order to taste wines and be exposed to wines.
Well, it's a fantastic thing to have happen at that stage in your life, to have that opportunity. What were you doing for the Monopoly board?
So I worked on the retail floor. I was a product consultant. So I worked in a number of different kind of subsets of the actual retail operation, mainly dealing with clients face to face, assisting them with some of the new vintages releases, assisting them with party preparation. At the time, we also used to have classrooms in a number of the stores. So I would teach wine classes, teach spirits and beer classes as well. I was also lucky to be on a number of tasting panels. So the principal one was the VQA, the Vintners Quality Alliance tasting panel, where wines would be submitted for approval to be denoted VQA here in Ontario. So that was again almost 20 years ago, and Ontario wines weren't quite what they are now. It was a great way to learn what faults were. I guess there's a significant amount of wines that came through to be graded.
Well, I remember that period really well because I was still in New York and Boston in late 80s until the early 90s, and Ontario wine, in my experience, was ice wine and nothing else. I think it's moved on since then.
It definitely has. In fact, I'd be happy to pour Ontario wines for anyone. We definitely have our own style. It's a cold climate. Even at the best of times, we're talking on a very cold winter afternoon here, but we are making some fantastic wines. Like any region around the world, it takes some time to focus on what the correct varieties are. You need to have planted, what makes sense, and finding the best sites. So I'm happy to pour Ontario wines, much happier than I was a couple of decades.
I can believe it. What are the primary red and white varietals that are doing well, producing quality wine in Ontario now?
Well, there's a lot of experimentation, which is great, but they refer to kind of the core four for whites being Riesling and Chardonnay, which really seem to excel. And for reds, Cabernet Franc definitely. In fact, I'll go out on a limb and say Ontario Cabernet Franc is as good, if not better, than anywhere else in the world. We get a real mid palate with our Cab Franc that seems to be lacking in other regions when they produce it. So I think it's a great that we can really hang our hat on.
You've got that lovely cold evening, so I'm sure you're getting acidity that we're not getting even in France, places that are hotter now. Climate change is your friend.
It is for sure. The evolution of the industry. We're starting to see producers really pull back from excessive oak usage, which tends to be something you grow through as a new wine region. So really seeing some stylistic differences and wines that are just truthfully they really just excel. We're also making some great Pinot Noir, and we're making some fantastic Gamay. There's just unfortunately not enough of it in the ground right now, but that's definitely a great variety to watch here in Ontario.
Up and coming. I'm excited. So you moved on from that position and you arrived at the Vine in Cave Spring. How did that come about?
Yeah, I went back to work in restaurants for a few years, and like many in the restaurant industry, I was missing out on holidays. I was working a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, and I was trying to figure out what the next step was in terms of being involved in the beverage industry, but maybe working somewhat of a more Monday to Friday role. I'll qualify that remark with the fact that sales is not a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 role, but there's a little bit more of a work life balance, which is great. So
Nothing in the wine sector is 9 to 5 for sure. Absolutely not. We're all looking for that balance, and it's very difficult to find for sure.
it is, and it is something that I've been with Avine for just over 10 years now. It's a fantastic company, really wide, a good portfolio for where we're located. We have a strong focus on Italian wines, a lot of California producers and French producers, a handful in other regions around the world.
Let's back up for a second and talk about the Vine. So for our listeners who don't know, give me a little brief background snapshot of the Vine.
Yeah, the Vine Agency is an import company that was started just over 20 years ago, 22 years ago, I think to be exact, by Rob Groh and his partner named Jasper. Started small. We work currently with about 70 wineries or so from around the world. Again, France, Italy, and California make up the majority of those producers. It's predominantly filled with smaller producers, family-owned producers, producers that are looking to they have wine to export and to sell, but they're not in the million plus caseload mark, so to speak.
No, and of course those kinds of producers are the ones who have real storytelling to do and real image building to do. So that's something I know Vine has focused on, getting those stories out there that I think are so important to our consumers.
I do too, and you and I chatted before. I think it's great to have the technical knowledge, but for me, I know when I'm opening a bottle of wine, it's more than just a refreshing alcoholic beverage. I mean, sometimes that's all it is, but it gives you that chance, that story that takes you. Maybe it takes you to the Veneto, maybe it takes you to Umbria. Maybe it takes you somewhere that you haven't traveled to before. I always, especially if it's a newer wine that I'm not familiar with, at least for the first few sips, try and do a little bit of background reading, perhaps the family or the producer or where it's from, and learn a little bit about it, because that to me is what makes wine fun and exciting.
And of course, in the past 2 years with the pandemic, we've had to travel through what we have in our glass. I mean, I've spent more time on Zoom. I'd never even heard of Zoom before 2020. I've been teaching, and I'm sure you have been, over Zoom, but that has become my way to travel, what I've got in my glass. and what I'm talking to people about has kind of been my substitute for travel. So I think we're really lucky in wine to have that opportunity to not be completely cut off. It's not the same as standing in a vineyard in the middle of, Spain or France or somewhere else, but at least we can taste and smell and, as you said, do the background work.
And I think I know at least here in Ontario we've been very lucky, very blessed. There's been a number of great online tasting wineries or importers or trade bodies that have put together, made the world a little bit smaller in some ways, and allowed us that opportunity to connect with others. As before, it's you had to hop on a plane and get overseas, but we've been very lucky to have those opportunities available.
So tell me about the collaboration with Cave Spring. Again, our listeners are probably not all that aware of Cave Spring and how they came to be part of the Vine.
Yeah, so Cave Spring has been our Ontario partner since pretty much the beginning. We work with one other very small Ontario producer called 2027 Cellars as well, but Cave Spring has always been kind of the main partner. In fact, Rob and Ann retired, finally officially retired last year, and Cave Spring has purchased the company, which I think was always, from my understanding, was always kind of the end game. But still two distinct organizations, while there's a little bit of overlap. And Cave Spring, for those that don't know, is one of the pioneers here in Ontario, planting some of the first vinifera here in the province way back in the early 1970s.
And what varietals are they growing? I mean, when we think of Canada, wine is not one of the first things that springs to mind, although it will become that way, I think, in the next decade or so. So we're still kind of cutting edge on getting this out into the consciousness of wine enthusiasts and wine lovers about the wine sector that's happening and growing in Canada right now. So what is Cave Spring doing? What are they growing?
Oh, Cave really, their principal focus is on Riesling. It's a great variety that over excels here in Ontario. Theirs tend to be on the drier side of the spectrum. They make 9 different Rieslings in total. So that includes a sparkling wine all the way up to a late harvest and an ice wine, of course. But Riesling is the main grape. It's a grape that not only shows unique and individual terroir, depending on where it's planted here in Ontario, and even there's very, very different styles and what you see on the Beamsville bench as an example versus what perhaps you might see in Niagara on the Lake. That's the main grape. We also focus on Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay. Those would be kind of the 4 main ones. We have a little bit of Gewürztraminer in the ground, beloved or hated grape. So it's definitely not for everyone, but I really like what they're doing with it.
Well, this is going to just kill the joy of everybody who's studying WSET around the world. Of now we have to add, Gewürztraminer and Riesling from Ontario to the studies. But this is again, as I said, very much climate change based and very cool things that are happening in a country that isn't known for wine production, and to have quality coming from these vineyards is so important.
And you're starting to see some interest, other places in Canada that are starting to make some really great wine. So Nova Scotia is an example. There's some great producers out there working with a lot of hybrids mainly, but doing some cool stuff. Even Quebec, which is colder than us here in southwestern Ontario, is making pretty cool, fun stuff now too. So it's definitely an exciting time in Canada. Whether they'll ever be on a WSET exam or Court of Master Somm exam, I don't know. I mean, the challenge with those exams is getting enough out into the export markets. We're still pretty tiny in comparison.
Absolutely. And you've just handed me the perfect opening to really cut to the chase. What I really want to talk to you about is your pandemic baby, the Road Wine, your new import business that you started during the global pandemic, which is incredibly brave, particularly in Canada, where the rules and regulations are pretty strict and pretty difficult to navigate. So let's hear about the Road Wine. I'm really excited about this.
I'm glad you're enthusiastic. Yeah, it's there have been a couple of positive takes on the wine industry side here in Ontario since the pandemic that our government has made some changes. The first and foremost, so for those that aren't familiar with Ontario, it's a government monopoly. Even wine agencies that work with producers around the world, it's actually the LCBO that brings those wines in. We just act as the agent for distribution. So, as an example, the vine works with a winery called Praw in the Veneto, fantastic producer, but the PO to be cut by the LCBO, and we have a limited amount of warehouse space. Now, that's been one of the biggest challenges for agencies, particularly new agencies, is that before would take quite some time before you could actually get warehouse space. It was a long waiting list. The government made warehouse space available for new agencies last year, which just started for us in November. So that was kind of an impetus for us. My business partner and I, Megan Ridgway, have talked about importing our own wines for a number of years. So we saw this opportunity and started to do the legwork. It's been a slow uphill climb, as you could expect, dealing with the government at every turn and angle. But we had two kind of mandates that we were looking at in terms of wineries we wanted to bring in. First and foremost was producers that are very eco-conscious, farming, not just farming organically certified, but that are really doing the right things for the planet. We all know organics. It's not a black and white situation. There's good ways to farm organically. There's terrible ways to farm organically. So
let's talk about that for a second, Rob. I mean, this is a real kind of hot button issue in the wine sector right now. It is. I mean, we all know that it is, and people bandy about terms like organic, biodynamic, eco-conscious. So, how are you selecting the wineries for the road? When you talk about your eco-conscious focus, what are your parameters? Because this is an important thing and a very cool way to select a wine list.
Yeah, it's at least here in Ontario for probably the better part of the last decade, natural wines have really started to take hold. You're seeing that being a very prevalent part of a lot of importers' wine lists. For us, what we think is important, in terms of organics, if you're still spraying copper on your vines, you're still spraying a heavy, I don't see how that's sustainable. There's definitely different approaches you can take. If you're running your tractors to the vineyards double the amount of time, you're still burning fossil fuels. So I think biodynamics at least moves that a little bit more forward. And we're very lucky. We work with a number of producers that are using regenerative farming as their main principle.
What is regenerative farming? Let's define that for everybody who's listening, because you and I know, but that's not fair to everybody else.
No, if you have access to Netflix, there's a great documentary. Anyways, hosted by everybody's favorite hippie, Woody Harrelson, and it talks. I think I've watched this 3 times now. I'm a big fan of his, but it's pretty inspiring. Climate change is, I know what we're seeing here in Canada in terms of weather, et cetera, it's happening faster. So regenerative farming there's a number of different tenets to it, but it's to really distill it, it's farming the soil as opposed to farming the crops. So by having good soil health, in effect, you're going to have better grapes to produce your wines with.
You're going to be the most beloved person of Professor Attilio Scienza.
And I first came across it. There's a podcast with Mimi Castile a few years back, and that was the first time I'd heard that term used in any connection to wine. So I've really started to kind of investigate. And a lot of it seems like it was on the tip of everyone's tongue last year in wine, and you see more and more talk and chatter about this. I know Jackson Family Wines in in the U.S. is looking to have all of their vineyards regeneratively farmed by 2030. So
Absolutely. Katie Jackson is really pushing that forward.
their online video series that they did in the fall was spectacular. It's I don't remember the name of it, but fantastic videos, moderated by Elaine Chuckham Brown. So that was kind of the one of the main focuses for us. Be able to bring in some producers. Alice Anderson's Omvi production down in Santa Barbara. Gina at Lady of the Sunshine, also in and around that area, is also working with regenerative farming. Ergolay Brothers. It's mostly California producers right now. Other areas around the world that we're bringing wines in from. We're also having those conversations. So that was kind of the first lens. The other was we were really looking to bring a little bit more diversity, equity, and inclusion into our industry. I mean, if you were to attend a trade tasting in Ontario, it's a lot of people that look like me, old white guys. That's still an overwhelming majority. So it's we thought, well, what can we do to I mean, how can we start to make a difference? BIPOC owned wineries or producers. That was kind of that was a big step for us. We're also if you looked at our portfolio, the overwhelming majority are female owned businesses, female winemakers.
It's absolutely huge. I live in Italy, as you know, very, very male dominated wine industry. So, and I have four daughters. So, seeing a man who is putting forward the fact that female owned wineries as an important part of his portfolio is something that I really get behind. And I know you're doing that. And I know you're also taking a look at marginalized communities, LGBTQ communities in the wine industry as well.
Correct. We've got one for sure. Another one that we're just in talks with. I'd say it's 95%. For us, it's not just about having these fantastic producers. I mean, the wine always has to be great quality too, but it's also about the conversations that we're having with our restaurant or with our retail clients, and about why these are important and why we need to look outside of the very Eurocentric wine industry that we all grew up with and were exposed to.
So, what's the percentage on your list at the moment between USA, Canada, and European wines? Because it's pretty hard to stick to this ethos, which I celebrate and applaud, of female owned, LGBTQ owned, and also regenerative biodynamic wineries. It's tough to stick to that and keep a wine list that's balanced. How is your country balance globally on the list that you're importing at the moment?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So going back again, we're limited with space with how much we can bring in by the LCBO. There's a biannual review that's based on the amount of cases that we've sold over a 6 to 12 month period, which will give us a chance to move up in tiers. But we're currently working with 16 producers. There's plans to bring another, hopefully 3 or 4 on board over the course of 2022. But depending on how things happen in Ontario, particularly, right now restaurants are closed again due to COVID. So we have the best laid plans, but it's hard to predict a month out right now. I would say, just taking a look at the list quickly, probably 60% are female owned, maybe even 70% are female owned businesses. Right now, the overwhelming majority are California producers.
And are you e-commerce focused at the moment because of pandemic? I mean, all of us have had to pivot to being much more e-smart as I look at it. So how are you aiming the business at the moment?
Yeah, so our first wines just landed here in Ontario. Were available for sale 2 weeks ago.
I'm just going to point out that you only started this in the spring. So it's been what, 9 months, 8 months?
Barely, yeah, barely. It hasn't been that long, and
This is hugely brave to do in Canada in the middle of a global pandemic. So I am so impressed by the fact that you had the nous to do this and that you are insisting on an ethically stringent way of looking at your wine list. It's impressive.
thank you. And it's something that we know we're gonna make mistakes. We know we're gonna trip up, and we're okay with that. But for us, it's important that we're having conversations, and at least starting a conversation. People may not be interested in a particular wine or winery that we're bringing in, but at least if we can talk to them about our philosophy. And why we're making these decisions, and frankly, from everyone that we've chatted with so far, the support is out there. It does seem like the industry is ready to move in this direction, and hopefully we can inch it along a little.
Absolutely, I think it's our responsibility to do that as well. We're growing an organic crop. We're making a product that is thousands of years old, and we need to make sure that in terms of today's reality, we're respecting what we do. So I love that you're doing that. I want to ask you, who is your main client at the moment? Are you restaurant based? Are you private clients? Are you, just Mr. or Mrs. Smith who find you online? Who are you selling to right now?
Well, it'll be predominantly restaurants, but we do have a private retail business as well. And one of the challenges here in Ontario is that for the average consumer to purchase from us, they have to buy it in the case that it was brought into Ontario in. So if that's something we're bringing in a 12 pack or a 6 pack, they have to purchase a whole case. We can't sell individual bottles, which is just it's a government rule. It's probably not going to go away at any point.
So you're an educator, Rob. How are you educating these people to to come and seek out your wine? Because I love the list that you're curating right now, and I love this philosophy behind it. So I want to hear where you're going with your education for your clients, both restaurants and private clients.
Yeah, and one of the I think I mentioned there's been a couple of positive moves by our government. One of the first things, and this might sound strange to those in other parts of the planet, with perhaps a little bit more progressive wine industries, but up until recently, a restaurant wasn't able to sell you a bottle of wine to take home. So the government has allowed restaurants, they said, and this started back about the spring, early summer last year, to create their own bottle shops. So it's given us an opportunity to work with some restaurants, smaller restaurants, have our stock available. The markup isn't as high as purchasing as you would if you're to eat in and dine. So it's given us an opportunity to do some pretty cool things. There's also been a significant amount of wine clubs, online wine clubs, created in the last 12 to 24 months, let's say. So there are some unique opportunities for us to be able to get whether it's a mixed case or the like out to our clients. So it's going to take a lot of talking, a lot of explaining the system to people. One of here in Ontario, and even on the buying side, we've seen significant growth in people purchasing that didn't want to go out. Perhaps they were didn't want to go out into public or go out into the retail stores, so they've been ordering online. So it's definitely pushed people in our direction. It's now just a matter of giving them what they want and what they're looking for.
Well, I hope this sort of new normal of being able to look online, being able to find something that fits not only your taste preference for wine, but also your philosophy for what kind of wines you want to buy continues in the future, because you're doing something that's really special and that has come out of restrictions and constraints. And I think this is something that's very positive that's come out of something so negative. So I applaud you for that. This is amazing.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I mean the world seems to be moving at a fast rate these days. So I think this, it's we're at the right time, the right space for our opportunity to, to be able to get out there and to connect, and again, to have those conversations. And we're probably, we're never going to be a large import agency, and I don't see that really, at least in the immediate future. Never say never, but I do hope that we're always going to have some great connections with our suppliers, be able to be honest and truthful with their stories here in Ontario.
Well, before I let you go, because you are an Italian wine ambassador, as am I have to ask you, what is your favorite Italian wine, and what Italian wines are you importing?
Well, we've got, that's going to be so hard to pick one.
I know, it's a terrible, mean question. I apologize.
It is, yeah. Because it really just depends on the day of the week. I'd mentioned Pra earlier. I'm a huge fan of their Suaves. I think they're absolutely fantastic. I love Radicchio. For me, I drink a lot more white and red, just for the fact that it tends to generally have a little bit lower alcohol, so I can have an extra glass or two and still feel sort of productive. I absolutely love Radicchio. We work with a small producer called Vichy, and they're just making some dynamite, long-lived wines. I was one of my last trips to Italy. I had an opportunity to drink a 2004 Radicchio that was literally it really opened my eyes to how long that grape can go. So.
Well, hopefully we'll get you back here in April for Vinitaly and for other things that are happening with Vinitaly International and 5-Star Wine and Opera Wine and all of the things that we do under the Mama Jumbo Shrimp umbrella and our Italian Wine podcast. And I will be the first one to turn up with a bottle of Verdicchio, probably from Matelica, just to give you something new.
Excellent.
I really appreciate you coming on and being so open about your new venture. I think it's really cool that you have got such a focus on regenerative and female-owned and DEI and LGBTQ for a new venture that you started in the pandemic. I applaud you, and I hope to see you flourish, Rob. Thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for the invite. And yeah, hopefully April happens. I'm excited to get back on Italian soil sooner than later. So, especially on a cold Canadian winter's afternoon here, some fun in the sun would be great.
Hope to see you in Verona in the sunshine in April. Thanks, Rob.
Ciao. Thanks, Cynthia.
Thank you for listening, and remember to tune in next Wednesday when I'll be chatting with another fascinating guest. Italian Wine Podcast is among the leading wine podcasts in the world and the only one with a daily show. Tune in every day and discover all our different shows. You can find us at ItalianWinePodcast.com, SoundCloud, Spotify, Himalaya, or wherever you get your pods.
Hi guys, I'm Joy Livingston and I am the producer of the Italian Wine Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are the only wine podcast that has been doing a daily show since the pandemic began. This is a labor of love and we are committed to bringing you free content every day. Of course, this takes time and effort, not to mention the cost of equipment, production, and editing. We would be grateful for your donations, suggestions, requests, and ideas. For more information on how to get in touch, go to ItalianWinePodcast.com.